married, it is your separate property, but the next day when you go to work for that new company that you just inherited from your father, remember your community property time, the time you spend working each day, that's community property. So all earnings after marriage are community property.
Okay.
So you inherit this business that is separate property, but then the minute you start going to work every morning, the time and effort you're putting into it is community, and then that means the spouse is going to be acquiring an interest in the business or the wages that come from the business. So even though inheritance are separate property, sometimes we make a community property or a postmarital agreement that will define whether certain earnings or businesses that have been inherited are going to remain separate or remain community or part of one and part of the other.
Wow. Okay. Have you seen successful postnups? Have you ever done a postnup? I'm still intrigued that I think it would be a hard thing to do if they didn't want to sign a prenup to get them to sign that postnup.
Well, I've done quite a few postnuptial agreements, and we've had a good track record with those. They seem to help people solve problems. And sometimes pre- and postmarital agreements are not always about money. Sometimes they're about values or lifestyles. Some of the things I've seen in pre- and postmarital agreements are kind of hilarious. One woman came in, and the husband had a little dalliance with another woman. And so they came in and they made a postmarital agreement, and they decided that if one person kissed a member of the opposite sex, that they would have a $10,000 penalty.
Okay.
If they did something even a little worse than that, there could be a $100,000 penalty.
Okay.
I mean, that's kind of funny, isn't it? But that's sometimes...
I'm thinking he's very blessed to be be That's what I'm thinking. So, okay, that's pretty good.
It's not always about money.
Yeah, that's a good way to stay married. You know, take out that pig. Do you really want to kiss her under that mistletoe? Okay, all right, that's good. That's good. I didn't know that either. That's very interesting. Now, would you recommend a lot of people go online and there is it? I don't want to say if I'm wrong. There's a place that you can go and do your own prenup agreement, and how valid is that?
Well, I think an agreement is more enforceable when each side has their own lawyer.
Okay.
Because even if a man and a woman, married or about to be married, went online or crafted their own agreement, one side could always say, I didn't have a lawyer that explained this to me. I didn't know what I signed, and my fiance made me sign it, or his family made me sign it, or I don't speak English that well. I mean, there's a million excuses you can come up with why you really didn't think that agreement was doing what it was doing, and you could get it overturned. Okay. So home drafted pre- and postmarital agreements, I know some people do that, but I think they're not as enforceable as they need to be.
Okay. That was one of the things I read in my little research article here. It was stating that the president of the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers, when they're looking to break up a prenup, they want to know when it was signed, where it was signed, and under what conditions was it signed. So if the conditions are questionable, like you said, I guess if it's the day before the wedding, you could go in and go, I didn't want to sign that, and the judge could throw it out.
Right.
Yeah.
Because people do things differently when they're under duress, or when they're manipulated, or
I paid a lot of money for this dress. No.
Exactly.
What do you mean you're not going to walk down the aisle? Okay. All right. And so with the prenups and the postnups, how much experience should an attorney have? I mean, there's a lot of people out there that, let's say okay, I don't want to mention anything in particular, but what are the qualifications should an attorney have?
Well, I think you want to find someone that's been doing it for a while. You don't want to be a practice case on a new attorney. But yeah, I think a person should interview a number of attorneys, and they should specialize in this area, and they should be comfortable disclosing things to their lawyer, and ask the lawyer how many cases they've done. And again, check their record with the bar. Make sure they have a good, upstanding record.
Okay, and so never could just one attorney do both parties' prenup?
Well, one attorney can do it, but they shouldn't. I mean, it's not going to be as enforceable. It's a conflict of interest for one lawyer to represent both parties is a clear conflict of interest, because it's impossible to be completely fair. And so when one attorney does a prenuptial agreement, they have to disclose in writing to the clients in the body of the agreement that they've advised the client that this is a terrible conflict of interest. There could be very damaging consequences. The agreement could be unenforceable, and the parties have to acknowledge that. And the agreement may in fact be unenforceable if one lawyer does it. But sometimes that's the only way it gets done, and at least they have an agreement. It may not be as enforceable. It doesn't make it invalid on its face, but it just makes it less enforceable.
Okay, all right. So what we've done is we've covered the prenups, we've covered the postnups. Let's see, from births to living to dead, we do the wills, the trust. And I know there was a question regarding, I might be backtracking a little bit though, about in the wills and the trust that we were talking about. Do you mind if I do this?
No.
When a person dies, I'm sorry.
I don't know. What are you going to do?
That's what I wanted to say. If there's the trust and the will, and a person dies, and you've got all your documents there, what do you do? How do you go about to enforce the trust?
Right. We were going to cover that before.
Right.
We didn't have time.
So I wanted to know.
Right. What happens when somebody dies? Right. And well, when someone passes away, then the successor trustee takes over. Whoever you named in your living trust, if that's what you have, that person takes over, and they need to get three things. They need to get all of the documents in hand, the trust, the wills, and so forth. They need to get their identification, like a driver's license or a passport, and they need to get the death certificate of the person that's passed. So those three things: documents, identification, death certificate. And then that trustee marches around to each bank or financial institution where there are assets, and they marshal or gather all the assets. Then they pay the bills, file the tax returns, and then distribute the assets to the beneficiaries. You
pay the bills from the money from the trust?
Yes. That's right.
Because that gives you the authority to do so. Do you have to be accountable to anybody? I mean,
yes, the beneficiaries.
Okay.
And in fact, in most trust agreements, the beneficiaries are entitled to an accounting.
Okay, so do you inform the beneficiaries first before you pay the bills, or do you pay the bills and then you just pass out information? This is what happened to the money.
I think it's usually the latter. I mean, the trustee has a fiduciary responsibility to pay all the bills. Whether the beneficiaries want them to or not, they have an obligation to pay reasonable, justifiable bills. And then they can account to the beneficiaries as to what bills have been paid.
How does a trustee get hold of the documents? I mean, you don't hand copies of your trust to a trustee, do you?
Well, you'd be surprised how many successor trustees can't find their documents that they need. So that is a big problem. Hopefully the person that created the trust told the trustee where they kept it. And If it's in a safe deposit box, then the safe deposit box needs to be titled in the name of the trust. So when the trustee shows up with their identification and the death certificate, because they don't have the documents yet, the bank will open the box so they can get the documents.
I see.
So yeah, I mean, that's important. The successor trustee needs to know where all the paperwork is, including the post or premarital agreement, because sometimes that can dovetail or relate to the trust, and then they can have access to everything and do the job the way they're supposed to.
So I want to know who gets a copy of everything. Who are the players that get copies of these documents?
Well, under California law, all beneficiaries are entitled to a copy of the documents. At least that portion of the documents that relates to their share.
All the beneficiaries?
Each and every beneficiary, whether they're getting $1 or or not. Yeah.
Well, that makes it easier. Okay. All right. So that's good. So if the person who is the executor of the trust, if they lose it, they can always go to one of the beneficiaries. No? Yes?
Well, presumably, but hopefully the trustee's organized enough they're not going to lose their copy. Or maybe they can go back to the lawyer. And if the lawyer kept a copy, and a lawyer should keep a copy of a pre- and a post-marital agreement and of the trust and the will, so a lawyer should have a copy at least.
What happens if the lawyer dies?
Well, lawyers are supposed to have a provision in their trusts or wills or some document that instructs their successor trustee or executor where to transfer all the files in the event of their death.
Okay.
And at that point in time, if an attorney dies, all the files are going to go to another lawyer that attorney chose. But at that point in time, each client has the right to take back their file. So the new law firm is supposed to notify the client, your file's being transferred to our office because so-and-so lawyer passed away. And at that point, the client could elect to grab their file and keep it or take it to another lawyer.
Okay.
Because lawyers have a lot of stress, and sometimes, and they get old, and they do die, and that's important.
Wow, we have learned so much. I feel so educated.
So am I. This was a great show.
It was a great show.
Thank you for having me on.
I enjoyed it. It was Murvet's idea. No.
Well, I think a lot of people like to know all these things.
She's kind of shy, but she's very bright and very smart. I thank you and articulate. Mr. Hales, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for sharing your Saturday with us. Join us next week from the Halls of Justice, and we don't know what that topic will be. It could be premarital, it could be the FBI, it could be we've got a lot of friends. Just become one of our friends and tune in next week. Okay? See you.
Bye.